The NFL was rocked by an injury unlike anything we've ever seen before in Cincinnati. It put the entire NFL and sports world in peril over the last 24 hours. Rob Rang and I are going to be reflecting on our latest episode of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, your host for Locked On Seahawks. Joining me, as always, my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s out there, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Certainly a difficult day for all football and sports fans, maybe even people that aren't sports fans, given what happened in Cincinnati last night on Monday Night Football, a play that sent shockwaves throughout the sports world. And today really is bigger than football, Rob, and I'm just going to get right into it. We'll get to talk some Seahawks later in the show, but you and I were finishing the show yesterday live when this play happened, and Damar Hamlin, the defender for the Buffalo Bills, goes in and makes what looks like a totally typical football play, and then he ends up collapsing on the field. They had to do CPR on him to resuscitate his heart. They had to do it again when they got to the hospital, and you could just see the emotion on the field from the coaches, the players, the fans in the stands. This is unlike anything that we have ever seen in an NFL game, and it's an unfriendly reminder of the brutal sport that we love so much.
Yeah, it was very difficult to watch. In something as serious as this, I certainly don't want it to sound silly, but it was heartbreaking. And that's exactly what it felt like. I mean, you just had that pit in your stomach watching this unfold on, live television, obviously, and just an incredible audience because of how important of a football game that this was. And of course, that's not nearly as important as the young man's life. I mean, he's 24 years old. And he's a really good player, by the way, for the Buffalo Bills. He is living out his dream, had his family there, his mother there, as a lot of people have acknowledged. It's just very, very difficult to watch, very difficult to focus on the ramifications of playoff seedings or fantasy football championships and all those things that mattered so much to us until we watched that unfold. And so just obviously, all of our thoughts, our prayers to Damar Hamlin and his family, his all of his loved ones. We wish them the very best. And I will say this as just obviously as difficult of a moment as it was, and it continues to be. I am also just so impressed by humanity, frankly, by the way that this is has brought us together a little bit. And so to me, I'm always kind of looking for that silver lining. That is one from what is so far at least been a tragedy. And then we're just hoping that it winds up becoming a miraculous comeback.
Yeah, and at this point, we don't have a lot of updates for Damar Hamlin's situation. I did recently read that there was a report out there that he was making decent progress. They still had him in critical condition, unfortunately. So we are both keeping our fingers crossed. Our thoughts and prayers are with him, his family, and all of his teammates, everyone that's within the league, that he's going to be able to overcome this and make a full recovery. That is as scary of a situation as I've seen on a football field. And it's just crazy, Rob, because, and I mentioned it, we love this sport. Our listeners love this sport. America loves this sport. The world loves this sport. But the reality is that these guys are putting their bodies and their lives on the line every time that they go out in pads and helmets. And we see the injuries each week. We saw Jordan Brooks tear his ACL on Sunday, and he gets carted off, and then everything just moves forward. That's the way that football operates. Other sports have injuries in them as well, such as hockey and basketball, and we see guys get hurt. It happens. And you typically wait a few minutes, and then you return to the field and you keep playing. But this was an unprecedented situation with a player having to have CPR done for almost 9 minutes on the field. And it became apparent quickly. Again, you and I did not see it happen live, but I turned the TV on right after my wife had mentioned something was going on. And just seeing the way that things were unfolding in the field, the emotion from the players, the raw emotion. I mean, we see guys get worked up when injuries happen, but this was just on another level. And it really was a reminder of, just how brutal this sport can truly be. And, again, it looked like a traditional play. It didn't look like there was anything crazy that happened that would have led to this happening to this young man. And, it's a very unfortunate situation. It was a chilling situation. And I tried to write up an article this morning and I just couldn't think of the words to say and I'm still having a hard time coming up with words to say because it's just, and I think a lot of the players around the league last night, we saw that on social media where a number of players, just to hear a few examples here from Seahawks players last night, DJ Dallas tweeting life is fragile. Quandre Diggs, prayers up, man. Geno Smith, thoughts and prayers for Damar Hamlin and his family. I think that it is one of those situations that can be extremely difficult to think of the right things to say just because we had not experienced this before. This really was unprecedented. And as you mentioned, there are positives to take from this, and we are all paying close attention, hoping, praying that Damar Hamlin is able to make a full recovery from this. But seeing the solidarity around the league today with all 31 other teams posting a profile picture on their social media accounts with Hamlin's name and number, his jersey, and over $4 million, at least the last time I checked, it might be over $5 million now, for his GoFundMe page for his toy drive that he was just looking to get $2,500. And now there's probably over $5 million at this point. I donated to that cause, and I know a lot of people have. And we can complain about social media and Twitter, and there's certainly some negatives, but if there's a good thing from it, seeing the outpouring of support from people that don't even know Damar Hamlin or his family after this incident happened, it really does show that there is a lot of good in humanity that we don't talk about enough.
No, that's very well said. That is the positive I've been taking from this. When you've been around football, for as long as I have, you've seen some pretty horrific injuries. And obviously a lot of the games that I've seen have been at the high school or college level that aren't on a stage nearly as big as Monday Night Football. And I'm thankful that I had never seen anything quite like what we all witnessed on Monday night. As you said, you could just see the shock, the horror, the fear, and the love in his teammates' faces, in his opponents' faces. As someone who's done a few interviews over the years, and sometimes you have that extra little earphone in there, and you can hear the producer, you can hear other people in the background kind of trying to whisper information to you or whatever the case might be, to see just the gravity in the faces of all of the different announcers. I mean, I was flipping back and forth between two different channels to see if we could get updates, and just to know that they were the people who were speaking in front of the cameras, or on the radio, or whatever the case might be, to know that they were given all of the information that they legally and ethically could provide. And yet still, just the gravity that they were demonstrating, that's where you knew that this was something far more serious than we had seen before. So I choose to focus in on the positives, and the fact that Hamlin is still with us, at least as we're recording our show. Then that to me demonstrates what an incredible fighter that he is. He's already demonstrated what an incredible fighter he is, and I just wish he and his family the very best moving forward, of course.
Yeah. Thoughts and prayers for his family, his friends, his teammates, and those of you listening to the show. Again, like I said, I've already donated to this cause, but you can find this on my social media account, on my Twitter account at Corbin Smith NFL, Damar Hamlin Strong with the hashtag. I have his GoFundMe page for the Chasing M's Foundation Community Toy Drive. Again, last time I checked, it was over $4.5 million that had been raised for this cause. It's a great opportunity to show your respects for this young man who is a great football player and an even better player off the field. I have several friends on the Locked On community family that actually know Damar Hamlin one-on-one. They worked with him a lot, and it's obviously been a very difficult 24 hours for them as well. So make sure to check that out. Any donation is going to be beneficial for the cause, and it's, again, a great opportunity to show your respects for a young man that's fighting right now, and we hope that he's going to make a full recovery. We're going to shift our gears now to the Seahawks, and it's going to be difficult for us to do this on the show, but at the same time, all of us have our coping mechanisms. We know, those of you that are listening to the show, this is a great opportunity for us to also maybe escape a little bit what has happened here in the last 24 hours, and we can talk a little bit of football as well. So we're going to get to some Tell the Truth Tuesday takes coming up next here on our Tuesday edition of the Locked On Seahawks podcast. This episode is brought your way by Prize Picks. It's week 18 of the 2022 season, and I've got Joe Burrow throwing a pair of touchdowns against the Ravens. This might seem like a bold leap, but with Prize Picks, it's easy to play daily fantasy and put those entries to the test. Pick 2 to 5 players where they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection. You can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. No competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections in any sport that you watch, whether it's the NFL, NBA, MLB, boxing, or even disc golf. Safe and easy withdrawals. It's currently operational in over 30 states as well as Canada. So download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. You're listening to the Locked On Seahawks podcast, Tuesday edition. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to all the 12s out there. A really difficult day, but we're glad to have you on board listening to the Locked On Seahawks podcast, whether you're a regular listener or a first-time listener. We greatly appreciate your support. All right, Rob, let's talk a little bit Seahawks here. We had this big win, 23-6 over the New York Jets on Sunday. Yesterday, we dished out some takeaways. Now we've had a chance to watch the All-22 film, and I always have noticed this. There's always some unique perspectives that you can gain from watching the All-22 film that you don't get during the TV copy. And so for today's podcast, instead of us dishing out hot takes, and there might still be a few hot takes in here, but I want to really discuss some things that maybe we didn't get a chance to talk about yesterday that were revealed watching the All-22 film. So I'm going to dish it over to you. I know you've got a lot of thoughts on the defensive side of the football that you want to get off your mind here.
Yeah, I do. And I guess one of them is a hot take. I'll call myself out because I was a little critical of Tanner Muse in yesterday's show, Corbin, where I was kind of just criticizing the fact that a lot of his tackles, he kind of falls backward. And the running back or tight end, whoever the case might be, is holding the ball, is able to get an extra yard or two. And again, this is something I have seen going back to his days as kind of a rover safety player at Clemson. This is the former 100th overall selection of the draft by the then Oakland Raiders. He's bounced around the NFL just a little bit, but he has gotten stronger, and certainly the tackles that he made against the Jets were very impressive. They were physical downhill kind of stops. And so that was one of the things that I was really impressed with. And kind of going back over the All-22 tape, as you said, I expect Tanner Muse to look good in coverage, and he did so. He had a pass breakup, and he was that close to being able to steal an interception of Mike White. But I also was impressed just by his size, his physicality, and just his willingness to kind of put his body on the line, met the backs in the hole and knocked him to the ground. Had one play where he actually knocked a Jets pass catcher back a couple of yards. So just much more physical and competitive in his first real opportunity and taking over for Jordan Brooks. Really excited to see what we might see from Tanner Muse, and obviously in his starting opportunity here with the Rams this weekend.
Yeah, I'm going to dish out a hot take here too, because why not? It's Tell the Truth Tuesday. I think if the Seahawks have any regrets this season on offense or defense, not getting Colby Parkinson the football enough has got to be near the top of the list. And he had the best game of his career on Sunday. That was 5 catches, though. He had never had more than 3 catches in the game. And I think when you look at the fact that he's 6'7" and runs a 4.7, and I think he plays faster down in the field with those long strides, the catch radius, he should be getting way more opportunities in the red zone to what he does, and he should be getting a lot more touches. I think he should probably be the 3rd target behind DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, if we're being honest. And it just feels like there have been games this year where they had opportunities to game plan to make him a bigger part of their passing game, and they haven't taken advantage of that. I'm not going to blame Geno Smith for that. I'm not going to blame Parkinson for that. I think this is something that Shane Waldron has been inconsistent with. There have been games like Sunday where he's done a great job game planning his tight ends. And then there have been games like both games against the 49ers where inexplicably tight ends like Parkinson were not really part of the game plan in the passing game. And I just think that is something when they look back in the season, they're going to wonder, why did we not get Colby Parkinson more involved in the passing game? I mean, he's having a career year statistically because he had injuries the first 2 years, but 23 catches, 275 yards, and only 2 touchdowns. As good as he has been when he's had his opportunities, there just haven't been enough opportunities there. And I think Sunday further illustrated that with how well he played against a top 5 defense in the New York Jets.
Yeah, I thought the Parkinson was spectacular. And so we talked about this during yesterday's show, not just as a receiver, but as a run blocker as well. Kind of like what I just mentioned before with Tanner Muse, and how I was just impressed with the physicality. I've always been impressed by just the sheer size, the body of, or the body control and ball skills that Parkinson has possessed. That's why he's always been kind of described as more of like a receiver rather than a traditional blocking tight end, full service tight end, but he has become a full service tight end. So that was definitely one that I wanted to talk about as well. I'm going to switch back actually to the defensive side of the ball, Corbin. The Seahawks, of course, didn't have Ryan Neal in the game. And so we saw a lot of Jonathan Abram, a lot of Tease Tabor playing those roles. Abram actually switched down and played a lot of nickel and dime cornerback from the inside. And then Tabor was playing a bunch of different safety roles, but including a lot of playing very, very deep, where I've normally thought of as Quandre Diggs' territory in this team. I was really impressed by Tabor. He's not the fastest guy. He ran a 4.6 in the 40-yard dash, but he has really interesting route anticipation. He sees the routes developing and he charges downhill, made some nice plays. Abram gave up a couple of big catches to the Jets tight ends, but at the same time, he also is a physical presence in the box. I think that Abram has a better chance to stick here in Seattle in the way that they use safeties than with most other teams. I thought that kind of going in. But Tabor impressed me as well. I just really liked his instincts for the position in the back half. A lot of Seattle's biggest plays, the Diggs interception, at least one of Taylor's sacks, perhaps both of them, came while Tease Tabor was on the field, and where he and Abrams were on the field together. And that was not something that I necessarily expected, to have two of the relatively newest Seahawks defensive backs playing very important roles in their being able to shut down that Jets offense.
You got to give credit to Carl Scott and Sean Desai, because all the injuries that they have had at safety, and Trey Brown missing the first half of the season, as well as Mike Jackson has played all year. These two new coaches, there have been some issues with their run defense up front. I don't think you can blame that on these two guys, though they're mainly secondary guys. I feel like the secondary has been a surprising strength most of the year, especially considering all the injuries. I mean, you lose Jamal Adams in week 1, and then Ryan Neal comes in and plays at a really high level. And Ryan Neal misses the last 2 games. And yeah, they haven't been perfect. They've made mistakes, but Abram had some really nice plays. He had an interception that he dropped on Sunday, and that's not what he's known for, is catching the football. He is a box safety, but made some really nice plays tackling and had some nice plays in special teams. And Tabor has shown some things, as you mentioned, out there. So that has to be credited to the coaching staff, getting guys that weren't even here for training camp, bringing them in, especially Abram, who's coming in the second half of the year, and getting him up to speed with a new scheme that is difficult for safeties. and getting him up to speed quick enough that he can go out and play that well. That's a credit to the coaching staff. Staying on defense for my last take here from the game. I've talked about him a lot since training camp, but I was surprised the Seahawks did not use Myles Adams more early in the season. And I know there was a log jam at defensive tackle, but this is a guy that has been dominant in their preseason games. I thought he had an excellent training camp, which that matters more to me in the scheme of things because he's going against starters in practice. He was getting reps with the ones, but he kept being a healthy scratch. And finally, in the second half of the season, in part because of injuries around him, he's gotten his chance to play. And every week, he is getting incrementally better. There was a play in this game against the Jets where at 300 pounds, and I think it's generous to list him at that. Pete Carroll says he's 300. He's been 290 in their program. It looks to me like he's more in the 290, 295 range. He is light to be playing nose tackle in the NFL, especially in a 3-4 defense. But he took on a double team with perfect technique, perfect pad level, and remarkable effort, split the double team, and stonewalled the running back at the line of scrimmage. That was one hell of a play. And he's coming through with splashy run plays like that every single week the last 3 or 4 games. And so I think that Myles Adams is positioning himself. I'm surprised that it took him this long to get him on the field, but I think he's positioning himself as a guy that actually fits this scheme fairly well, despite his lack of size. He can play those 2 gapping roles. I think he's put himself in a position next year to play for a meaningful rotational role right out of the gate for the Seahawks on a defensive line that you and I both believe is going to be significantly different because of the draft and free agency. I think he's going to be one of those mainstays, though, that gets a chance to play a lot of snaps next year.
I 100% agree with you because he just keeps making plays. And, you know, there's been an absence of big plays from Seattle's defensive line so far this season. And so that's Myles Adams' big plays are, you know, just kind of looming large as a result of that. I'll tell you another guy who's made some big plays, not always the splashiest of plays, although Shelby Harris has made plenty of splashy plays as well. Corbin, we talked before about watching the All-22. There is a play where Shelby Harris makes a tackle about 30, 35 yards downfield on a wide receiver. That is just the epitome of why he is so highly regarded. Not the playmaker maybe that Myles Adams is, but another player that I thought deserved a little bit of credit since we're kind of, you know, turning the bright lights on some of the Seattle's kind of unheralded stars a little bit.
As always, 12s, we greatly appreciate you listening to the Locked On Seahawks podcast due to the circumstances from yesterday's game. And quite frankly, Rob and I have talked about this going in. We wanted to talk a little bit of Seahawks, but we also wanted to take a step back to reflect. And so today's episode is going to be a little shorter than normal. We greatly appreciate you taking the time to listen, as always, to the Locked On Seahawks podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob as well. Make sure to check out the Locked On Seahawks podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and streaming 5 days a week on YouTube. You can also find us on Amazon Podcast. Just make sure to shout out to Alexa and tell her to play Locked On Seahawks, and it'll play for you. So thanks for listening in. We'll be back tomorrow with Matchup Wednesday, and we'll get back to football. But today is a day of reflection. We appreciate you taking the time to listen. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks for listening. Go Hawks.